Jay-Z and Nas? Or is it Nas and Jay-Z? Depending on whose name you say in a conversation, that ultimately determines who you see as the superior MC. For the past 20 years or so, these two names have been synonymous with one another. This has mainly been surrounded around their 2001 rap battle. If you're checking out this video, then you probably already know the history between these two, so I'm not going to dive into it. Here, I want to mainly just go over who actually won the battle if we look at it today. If we take a look 20 years into the future and break down these verses that these two master MCs used to break down each other, then we can clearly get a view of who actually won this battle in the long run. In this video, we're going to be breaking down every single jab that was used in Takeover and Ether and analyze how much weight they hold today. For this analysis, I'm only going to be going over the last verses in each song, mainly because Jay-Z goes after Nas in the last verse on Takeover. I'm also taking into account that it was the last verse on Ether that a lot of people viewed as the nail in the coffin during the time when these two songs first came out. Before we dive into it, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe as the channel continues to grow. Alright, let's get into it. If you break down every single jab in the last verse of Takeover, this is what you get. First, he calls out Nas for having a whack verse on the song Uchiwali. Was the verse whack? Yes, it was. Now, having a whack verse as a top MC is not something that's uncommon. When you have longevity in the game, you're bound to have a weak performance here or there. And if we look at Jay's catalog, especially in the last year with some of these features, he's not immune to having a weak verse. In 2021, 2022, no one's really thinking about Uchiwali, so this really has no impact in the long run, so it's irrelevant. Next, Jay-Z calls out Nas for being a fake thug, someone who just scribbles in their notepad and created their life. Now, do I think Nas was some kind of a drug kingpin back in the day? Absolutely not. But there is evidence that shows that if he has to, he will hold his own. Listen to this story by DJ Envy when he rolled up on Nas trying to sell him some CDs.
This is Nas, so I'm like, this is me and my mans with me. And I'm like, yo Nas, hold up, I got something for you. So Nas, he stops, he looks at me, he tells the girl to get in the car. He's like, yo, what you got for me? I said, yo, hold up, I got something for you. So I go in my bag, when I come out my bag, Nas has a gun on me. What the you got for me? What you mean you got something for me? And I'm sitting there like, I drop my bag and everything. I'm like, a mixtape. It's just a mixtape. A mixtape. I swear, it's just a mixtape. Look. Mixtape. And Nas gave me the look. He said, he did one of these. Yo, you know shit is real out here, man. You don't come up to nobody saying you got something for me, man. Give me that mixtape.
Doesn't sound like a fake thug to me, so I have to give Nas some credibility when it comes down to the streets. So this line is irrelevant. Next, Jay-Z calls out how Nas was able to throw out a hot line, however, he was able to flip it into a hot song. That hot line comes from the song The World Is Yours, which Jay-Z flipped and turned into the song Dead Presidents. This line holds more weight than you think. 25 years after Reasonable Doubt, I am still bumping Dead Presidents. That's one of the songs I still go to this day. The only caveat to this is that the song that Jay-Z is referring to with the hot line happens to be a song on the greatest hip-hop album of all time. So even though Jay-Z was able to make a hot song from a hot line that I can still play 25 years after its debut, I'm doing the exact same thing with the song that he's talking about sampling the line from. So in itself, it kind of evens the playing field. It really doesn't give much weight. Now, if the Nas song was whack and the line was dope and then you took the line and made a hot song, now we talking. To say you took a hot line and made it a hot song insinuates that the song you took it from was not hot to begin with, and we all know that's just simply not true. So this line becomes irrelevant. Next, Jay-Z talks about the sample and how Nas wasn't the person he paid for the sample. Now, I always thought that this was a boss bar because I had nothing else to look at to prove Jay-Z otherwise until recently.
He gave me a check for $2,500. I delivered it to Zomba. But if you look at the liner notes on Dead Presidents, Nas is one of the publishers. So I say, yeah, that line can live as much as it lives, but Jay don't own a piece of Nas's catalog, but Nas owns a piece of Jay's catalog. And that's a fact, though.
Oh, we didn't know that.
Okay, so that just changed everything. The Jay-Z publishing that I thought he was going to be getting 20 years after that dope bar is actually going to Nas. So that's kind of interesting. Not only does this new evidence make this line irrelevant, it also works in Nas's favor. It would have been pretty cool to see Nas address this in a rhyme during the time of the battle, but I digress. Let's go ahead and move forward. In the next line, Jay-Z breaks down Nas's career in the span of 10 years and also highlights how he outshined him in half that time. Now, analyzing this line 20 years removed, let's take a peek at Nas's career from 1991 to 2001, in which he only had one flop album. And although this record was hot garbage, it still managed to go platinum. Before the release of Nostradamus, Nas had dropped Illmatic in 1994, which was highly regarded as the best hip-hop album of all time. In 96, he dropped It Was Written, which is a classic. And then in 1999, along with Nostradamus, he dropped I Am, which is a commercial album, pretty good, not great, and it has one of Nas's best cuts with Nas's like. Plus, he starred in Hype Williams' 1998 film Belly with DMX, a film that is highly regarded as a hip-hop classic. Although this line was hot and sparked a nerve at the time, it really doesn't hold any weight when you look at the overall evidence. So I have to say it's irrelevant. Now, if we take a look at today and take a view of where Jay-Z's career has gone musically in the last 10 years, it looks like he's having a one hot album every 10-year average. Now, I'm personally not a fan of 444, but I'll give you that. A lot of people love that record. I personally think it was a little overrated, and Jay wasn't dropping bars like Jay normally drops bars. But if you say 444 was a dope album, I'll give you that. I can't count Watch the Throne because that's a joint project. Same thing goes for the Jay Electronica record or Written Testimony. But everything outside of those three records really just isn't worth mentioning. Last but not least, on the Takeover end, we got Jay-Z alluding that he slept with Nas's baby's mother, which happens to be true. Now, this is going to be looked at as probably the strongest thing that Jay-Z said in the entire verse. Mainly because 20 years into the future, this incident still happened. You know, Jay can still look at the situation like, yo, I smashed your girl. The only downfall to this tactic is that it worked against Jay-Z more than it did for Nas. Although Jay-Z alluded to the affair on Takeover, he went all in on the track Super Ugly. However, the track was viewed so out of pocket that even his mom had to step in and check him. In hindsight, by revealing this news, it really didn't have any effect on Nas whatsoever. Moving on to Nas's track Ether, here are some of the jabs that he used throughout the last verse. First, he calls out that Jay-Z sold his soul for riches. Now, there's been conspiracy theories about Jay-Z being tied to the Illuminati, but I personally don't buy into it, and I don't have any evidence to really co-sign this line. When you really look at it, everybody inside the music industry is selling something for a price. So this line ties to a lot of people outside of Jay-Z, so in this case, it's irrelevant. Next, Nas calls out Jay-Z for stealing his style. Jay-Z was known for having a faster flow before adopting some of the traits that were pioneered by Nas and Big. 20 years after Nas dropped the bar, this is a flow that Jay-Z is still highly recognized for. The caveat to this is that although Jay-Z was inspired by the flow, he didn't necessarily steal it. He was still able to mold it into something that ultimately became his own. When I listen to a Jay-Z record, I don't hear a man who is necessarily inspired by Nas, or Big for that matter. I hear Jay-Z. Now, this is no knock on the Game, but when I listen to a Game record, I can clearly hear the Nas influence coming in and out of his flow, unlike when I hear a Jay-Z record. Game has openly admitted that his flow is heavily inspired by Nas. So yeah, looking back at this bar 20 years after its release, it does become irrelevant. Next, Nas claims that Foxy Brown made Jay-Z hot by appearing on his first single, Ain't No Nigga. This is a clever bar because it alludes that Jay-Z needed help in order to push his first single. However, when we look back at the whole body of work of Reasonable Doubt, we can clearly see that Jay-Z would have been successful with or without the feature. So 20 years later, this is actually irrelevant. Next, Nas says that compared to Beans, Jay-Z is whack. This is subjective, so 20 years later, this bar doesn't really matter long term, so it's irrelevant. Next, Nas calls out Jay-Z for getting murdered by Eminem on his own song, Renegade. Now, although this was originally an Eminem song, and it's done over his production, Eminem's fan base is so big that this still holds weight 20 years later. I don't even think Jay-Z and Eminem have done a song together since then. I believe this is mainly due to Jay-Z trying to avoid any other further debate. So this one definitely touched a nerve for the long run. And the last jab that I'd like to point out that Nas illustrated is where he calls out Jay-Z for dealing with emotions like bitches. Now, for me, a bitch is going to be someone who always has a negative outlook on life, or they need constant validation. Now, I don't have enough information to determine Jay-Z's overall outlook on life. However, based on the number of releases he's done simultaneously with a number of Nas's releases, it does appear that Jay-Z is seeking constant validation every time another MC is being recognized. Jay-Z's character also came into question by other artists once he was named the president of Def Jam. If this is true, then it does give Nas's lines some credibility. With all that being said, here are the results. I'm gonna give Jay-Z half a point for the baby mother line. Yes, it's true and it holds weight 20 years later. However, it worked against him during the time of the actual battle. On the other end, I gotta give Nas 4 points. Eminem's fan base still hold to Renegade to this day. Jay-Z releasing music around or on the same date as Nas shows that he needs constant validation. These last 2 points were actually pointed out by Jay-Z. According to Search, it's actually Nas who owns some of Jay-Z's publishing, and if we look at the landscape of both of their careers in between 2011 and 2021, it's Jay-Z who has had one hot solo album, in the last 10 years. Meanwhile, in the last 12 months, Nas has dropped 3 different projects, 2 of which are on the trajectory of becoming classics. But you guys let me know, did Nas win this battle or did Jay-Z win this battle? Is this even still up for debate? Let me know in the comment section, and also let me know if I missed anything. Remember to subscribe to the channel for more content, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.